So now, what have we taken so far? We have taken an overview of research. We have taken identifying a research question. We have taken literature review and how to decide on a study design. Okay? Now we said the next point is to do a proposal. We have to write a full proposal and submit it to the committee, research committee, or the institutional review board so that they can review it, make sure that they give us the approval to do the study. So writing a proposal, what is a research proposal? A research proposal is the summary of an idea that a researcher wishes to pursue. So it's a summary. It's not going to be a detailed document that says exactly what you are going to do, but it should be a good summary. To prepare a good research proposal, a researcher should devote time and effort in gathering information, reading, and organizing ideas. Now, the worst thing that you can do is to have a poor proposal. Some people do proposals over a very short period of time. Why? Because we have a deadline for submission. Let us do a proposal. They'll do it over a week. Okay? It's bad. Why? Because the proposal is the whole plan for the study. If you plan your study bad, most probably the study will not be good. It will be not valid. This is why you have to devote time and effort to be able to put a good proposal. Some proposals take up to a year or a year and a half to prepare if you are planning to submit it to a big institution. For example, if you want to submit it to the National Institutes of Health in the States and to get funding for it, you should give enough time to write a good proposal. Now, a research proposal should contain all the key elements, everything that's crucial, key elements involved in the research process, and include sufficient information for the readers to evaluate the proposed study. So you have to pick up your information or the information to provide in the proposal. It should be the key information and anything that me, for example, as a reader who is evaluating your project or your proposal, you should provide me with everything I need to understand what you're doing, why are you doing it, how are you going to do it, and what you expect to find. So everything that I need to know, it should be in the proposal. A research proposal is intended to convince, this is very important, because these research committee members are the judge who are going to decide whether your study is going to be carried out or not. So you have to convince the research committee that you have a worthwhile research project, that you have an important research topic, an important question to be done, and that you have the competence and the work plan to complete it. So you have to inform them or to show them that you are a good researcher, you are a good literature reviewer, you are a good scientific person to be able to do the study. Otherwise, they will tell you you're not eligible to do the study. We will not give you the approval to do it. So, why to write a proposal? To draw the map of the study. I usually give the example of going on a trip. If you are going on a trip, you expect to do everything in advance. You have to plan it, right? You, for example, book the tickets, you book the car reservation, you get the visas, you put your bags, and so on. So the more planning you do for your trip, the less surprises you will have during your trip, right? The same thing is with the research. If you do not plan your study well through a good proposal, every now and then you might have a surprise that you did not think of, and it might affect the continuity of your study or even the successful finishing of your project. This is why give enough time for this, the proposal to be written properly, because it will be a road map. It will act as a map for your study. The other reason is to obtain institutional approval and IRB approval. We said it's called Institutional Review Board. And to obtain funding, to get money. Because nobody will give you the money if they are not convinced that you have a good study. Overall view, a research proposal should address the following. What do you want to do? What do you want to do is through the objective, right? What do you want to do in your study? Why do you want to do it? The background, the introduction, the gap in the knowledge. So you have to establish why is it important to do this study. Otherwise, it's not important. How are you going to do it? This is the methodology. How are you going to do it? I'm going to do a clinical trial. I'm going to collect this information and so on. So how are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? So are you going to do it in the next year? It takes 6 months, 1 month, 7 years to be done, and so on. So you have to give information about timing and how much would it cost. You cannot ask for over estimates of the budget. You cannot ask for, let's say, ₦1 million to do a small cross-section study. You have to justify it, and so on. So the proposal should briefly or should address all these items in a very elegant manner. Now, background information, what to write in the background information, names of investigators. It is very important for the research committee to know who is going to be doing the research. So is it going to be 1 person, 2 people, 10 people? What are their expertise? Is there a biostatistician with them? Is there an epidemiologist? If you're doing on a drug, do you have a clinical pharmacist? If you're doing on so on and so forth. So it's very important to know the names of the investigators, their affiliations in terms of the institution. Where are they affiliated? This institution or that institution. Contact information, because the committee might need to contact those people for certain inquiries. Amount of money requested, how much money is needed, and the signatures. Why do you need to put the signatures? Because it's a contract with the hospital or with the institution. You as a researcher, when you say, I'm submitting this proposal to be done, you have to sign and to get bound by a legal aspect with the institution that you are going to do this, 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 and that. Now, the literature review provides the reader with the background information for the research. Most of the times, those who are going to review your proposal are not going to be content experts. In other words, if you are doing something in oncology, it doesn't mean that oncologists will be reviewing your proposal. Most of the times, somebody who has a little bit of information about oncology will be reviewing it, right? An epidemiologist who is not an oncologist, he is a methodologist, so they will read your proposal and they will decide on it. So it's very important to provide the reader with the background information for the research. What is the topic about? What is this drug used for? What are the side effects? And so on and so forth. It is done to establish a framework for the research. You have to put the research in a framework. Establish the link with other reported studies. The literature review, as we said in the literature review part, that you have to make a link. You have to integrate whatever you want to do and whatever is published in the literature. More specifically, you have to create interest. The literature review is very much like a story, okay? It is an introduction to a story. If the story is boring, nobody's interested in finishing it. And it's the same thing here. If the introduction is not interesting enough to show me that this is a major problem and there is not enough information and there is no enough literature mentioned and the aspects and the consequences and so on and so forth, I will not be interested in continuing and reading the methodology part. This is why you have to create interest throughout the background and the introduction to, for me to get enthusiastic to read your proposal. Lay the broad foundation for the problem that leads to the study. Gap. You remember when I talked about the gap? This is the gap. The gap is you have to lay the broad foundation for the problem. The problem is we do not have such information in Saudi Arabia. This is the gap. This is why I'm here to fill out this gap. I'm here to do the study to fill this gap. Place the study within the larger context of the literature. How would my study help in the whole picture of the literature? It establishes the need of the research, the gap. This research is needed. Why? Because we don't have any information in this area and so on. Indicate the writer's knowledge about the area. The better the introduction that you write and the literature review, the more you establish that you are a knowledgeable person, you are a good person to do the study. The less or the weaker the introduction is, it is an indication that the author or the investigator is not good enough to carry out the research project. The statement of the problem. So what do you want to do? The problem should stand out. A problem might be defined as the issue that exists in the literature, theory, or practice. This is the gap, as we said, that leads to a need for the study. It should be stated in simple terms so that it might be understandable to someone who is uninformed in the area of the study. So it's something like, it should answer the question, why does this research need to be conducted? And as a reviewer in a research committee, I will be looking for the answer of this. I'll have in my mind one question. Why do you need to do the study? I need to find the answer. This study needs to be done so that this, and that will be answered. If this answer is not clear, then the justification for the study is weak. If you do not answer the question, why is this study needed, then your study is not justified. We can live without your study, right? But if you say that we are needing this study because of this, this, and that, we can see as a research committee that this is important. The purpose is the objective, should provide a specific and accurate synopsis of the overall purpose of the study. This is where you establish what are you going to do. If it is not clear to the writer, I will repeat this. If it is not clear to the writer, it will never be clear to the reader. Okay? Because I said it twice, because most of the times the objective or the purpose of the research is not clear even for the person who is doing the study. Right? So you have to make sure that I want to do the study to do this, 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 and that. Okay? Now, it has to be clear to the writer before it is clarified to the reader. It starts with something like this. The purpose of this study is to assess the association between this and that, evaluate the increase of something, estimate the prevalence of hypertension, and so on and so forth. But it should be very specific. Now, the methods section is as important as the literature review, right? Because the final decision on the research proposal is based on the methodology. You might have a wonderful question. You might have a very nice introduction that's written, a very clear objective that's specified, a clear gap in knowledge, but you reach the methodology, you don't know what to do, right? Is it going to be accepted? Most probably not. Okay? So the methodology is very important to show the committee, the research committee, that you know what you're doing, and the methodology that you have selected is the most appropriate methodology to answer the specific question that I have. So it is the heart of the research proposal. It's the most important part. Should be as detailed as possible. The more details you give, the better picture you will give to the committee. Continuity should be evident. In other words, don't jump from one aspect to another. Don't start, for example, with the study design and then go to the exposure and then jump to the conclusion, to the outcome and then the statistical analysis. It should be consistent. And consistent in the sense of how you think of it. So the way you think of a methodology of a paper, the first is, what study design, right? Where do you want to do it? In which institution? When do you want to do it? Who do you want to include into your study? Patients, inclusion, exclusion. What do you want to collect from these patients? Information to be collected. Once you collect the information, what analysis are you going to be doing? So the methodology has to follow a certain sequence. What is the design? What is the inclusion, exclusion? Sampling, how are you going to get the sample? Data collection, data analysis, sample size calculation, and so on. So it has to follow a certain sequence. Now, of course, it should directly relate to the objectives of the study. In other words, if you are telling the reader that you are doing the study to establish or to assess the prevalence of hypertension, right? The methodology, the whole methodology part should be dealt in a way that it will answer this question, because this is the objective of the study, right? So you cannot develop a methodology to get the association between physical activity and diabetes, for example. Why? Because your objective is about prevalence of hypertension. So everything that follows should be directly related to the objectives of the study. It is a story, remember. It's a full story. Now the references, only references cited in the text are included. Okay? You do not include references that you have read. If you read something but you do not include it in the proposal, you do not put it. Right? You put only things that you have used in the proposal. Should be relevant. Don't put references that are away from the topic. Put only those that are relevant to the topic. Should be updated. One of the things that we look for as a research committee is the dates of the references. I do not expect that if you wrote a proposal nowadays in 2011 that you will put something in 1970 as a reference. It's very old, right? So you have to have an updated literature review, an updated references. One last comment, better to not reference than to reference wrong, right? So when you put a reference, make sure that your reference is right. The reference in terms of writing and the reference in terms of what you have taken from the paper, okay? Now, Before I talk about the format, I just want to say something very briefly about plagiarism. You might know what plagiarism is. Plagiarism is when you take something that's not yours and claim that it's yours. In other words, in research, you cannot take a sentence from or a paragraph from a paper that's published and put it on your proposal. Why? Because you are saying that you have the one who wrote that, but in fact you are not. Okay? Nowadays, there are a lot of programs or even websites on the internet where I can put, for example, if you write a paper, I can take part of this paper, put it on this website, and they will tell me if there is plagiarism or not. In other words, it compares with so many different documents around the world, right? And it will give me a percent. It will tell me, masalan, for example, 10% of this paper is copied and pasted from somewhere else. Okay? So it's very important not to copy and paste. If you want to copy and paste a sentence, you put the quotations, right? Quote that this is taken from this reference, and you have to always reference. The format of a research proposal, it depends. There is no universal format for research proposals. Each institution has a specific format. So wherever you are working, you ask for the format of the research proposal and you fill it up. But the point is, adhere to the institutional format. Don't take, for example, sometimes we submit our proposals to different places. Don't take the proposal you submitted to this institution and as it is submitted to that institution. It will be very annoying to the research committee. If you do not take the time, like one day, to modify your proposal according to the new institution, it means that you're a lousy researcher. It means that you are not going to do a good job when you do the research. So make sure to adhere to the institutional format. Tips. PI, co-investigators, assistants, etc. It has to be planned. Plan it well. The research proposal has to be planned well in terms of who do you have to help you. Deadlines. Always watch deadlines, because sometimes you will reach a place and you'll say, okay, wow, the deadline is next week. So what happens is you will rush with the research proposal, and most probably it will get rejected if you are submitting to a good institution. So watch deadlines, plan it ahead of time. Know what you want to do before writing it. So clear it in your mind before you put it on paper. The worst thing that you can do is to start writing things on paper that do not make sense and it's not clear for you. Eventually it will be very confusing. So think it well in your head and then put it on paper. The proposal should follow a chain of ideas that are coherent. We talked about the sequence and the ideas. So what is known, what needs to be done, what are you going to do, how we are going to do it. So these are all chain of thoughts. Proposal should be interesting and informative. Use headings and subheadings. Don't put everything in one full section. Put headings and subheadings. Study design. This is the study design. Sampling. Put sampling and explain how you are going to sample. Inclusion, exclusion. Put the exclusion, inclusion. So divide it into headings and subheadings. Use simple language, but not overly simplistic. Don't use very complicated words, right? Because as I told you, most of the times, non-content experts will review your proposal. Avoid very technical, detailed, sophisticated words. But of course, you're talking with the scientists. Don't be oversimplistic. Don't underassume or undermine their wisdom. Check spelling and grammar. It's very annoying if I'm reviewing a proposal to find grammar mistakes all over the place. If I see that, most probably the reviewer will stop focusing on the content of the proposal. They will start focusing on the word and the language. So make sure to check the spelling and grammar. And Microsoft Word, for example, does that. It will give you an underlining of anything that does not make sense. So make sure you use this service. Include all relevant forms like questionnaires, consent forms, approvals, and so on. Have your proposal read by others. No matter what, and it should have happened to you before, that when you do something over and over and over and over again, you become blind. In other words, there might be a clear mistake, but because you have gone over it so many times, you become blind to this mistake. You cannot see it. So it's very advisable to give your proposal to one of your colleagues. Please spend an hour reading it and tell me what you think. Okay? This way, you will have a second person's opinion about it. So it's better to have comments from your colleague, from your superior, from your supervisor, from your whoever, instead of having the comment from the research committee. Okay? Questions?
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'd like to ask, how would you structure or organize your literature review? Is it in terms of ideas or chronological order?
All right, thank you very much for the question. Basically, a literature review, as we have mentioned earlier, you will be getting a lot of articles, right? But before you get the articles and get lost with all these articles that you have to identify what ideas you want to talk about. In other words, usually the ideas are divided into, based on the research objective. I'll just give you an example. Assume that you are interested in assessing the association between antidepressants and cancer. Okay, so this is the topic that I'm interested in. So theoretically speaking, before I reach the chronological order, I have to know what are the ideas or the topics I want to include into my literature review. So the first idea is about antidepressants. I talk about antidepressants, and the second idea would be about cancer. The third idea would be antidepressants and cancer. In other words, first I have to establish the information about antidepressant. What is it used for? How frequently is it used? When was it introduced? What are the side effects? Anything that has to do with antidepressants. Now, within this idea, you might have different studies at different points in time, right? The same thing for cancer. How big is the problem? What is the cancer you are talking about? How many people die, how many people, so on and so forth. So the problem of cancer, again, you might have a chronological order. And finally, antidepressants and cancer, where you mention any study that has been carried out about the association between antidepressants and cancer. Now, these are the ideas. Within each of them, you might have 5 articles here, you might have 2 articles here, you might have 3 articles here. How to organize them within each area? I would say according to the chronological order. In other words, in this, I would like to start with the earliest and come to the most recent. In other words, I can say that the antidepressants have been used since 1950s. The first antidepressant used was in 1950, and so on and so forth. And I reach, for example, in 1990s, the new class of antidepressants, the SSRIs, was introduced. The same thing for here, antidepressants and cancer. I would say the first study that was carried out on this association was in 1970 or 1980 or 1990, and I keep on going based on chronological order till I say most recently a study was published on this area, and so on and so forth. Now, this is where the part you have to identify the disadvantages or the limitations of previous studies, and this is where you have to identify the gap, because the second section should be the objectives of your study. I hope this answers the question. Thank you.